I was 7 years old the first time my brother broke something of mine and looked at me like it was my fault for caring. It was a music box. Small, wooden, painted with a faded rose on the lid, the kind of thing you'd find in a thrift store bin and think, someone loved this once. Our grandmother had given it to me before she passed, and when you opened it, a tiny ballerina spun in slow, wobbling circles to a tune that always sounded like it was trying to remember itself. My brother, Benjamin, was 9. He didn't like that I kept it on the shelf above his old race car track, which he'd decided was his side of the room even though we shared it 50-50 by our mother's explicit ruling. He knocked it down reaching for something else, at least, that's what he said. I've never been sure if I believed him. The ballerina snapped off at the ankle. The music stuttered once and went silent forever. I cried the way only a 7-year-old can cry, like the world itself had cracked. Benjamin stood over the pieces, hands in his pockets, and said, "It's just a box, Charlotte." Not sorry. Not I didn't mean to. Just a flat little sentence that closed the door before I could even ask him to open it. That was the first thing. It was not the last. There was the kite I'd built for a school project, crushed under his bike tire in the driveway because he wanted to see how fast he could go over it. There was the shoebox diorama of a rainforest, ruined when he used my glue for his own project and knocked the whole thing into the trash by accident. There was my first bicycle, the pink one with the white basket, which he borrowed without asking and returned with a bent front wheel because he'd taken it off a curb too fast to impress his friends. There was the stack of paperback novels I'd saved up allowance money to buy, left out in the rain on the back porch because he'd wanted to build a fort and needed something heavy to weigh down the tarp. Every single time, the pattern held. Something of mine, in pieces. Benjamin, unbothered. Me, furious and small and unheard. Our parents worked long hours. Our father drove a delivery route that kept him out past dinner most nights, and our mother picked up extra shifts at the hospital pharmacy whenever she could. They loved us, I want to say that clearly, because this isn't a story about neglect. It's a story about two kids left alone together too often, one of whom learned to take up space by breaking things, and one of whom learned to shrink so there'd be less to break. I used to bring my complaints to our mother in the evenings, holding out the wreckage like evidence in a trial. She'd sigh, rub her temples, and say the same thing every time, "Benjamin, tell your sister you're sorry." And Benjamin would look at the floor, or at the wall, or anywhere but me, and mumble something that had the shape of an apology but none of its weight. "Sorry," he'd say, in the tone people use when they're sorry the conversation is happening, not sorry for what they did. I stopped bringing him the wreckage after a while. I just started keeping fewer things I couldn't bear to lose. By the time I was 10, my side of the room was almost bare, a few books, a blanket, nothing that could be broken because nothing was left out to break. I didn't realize until much later how strange that was, how a child learning to want less is its own kind of quiet tragedy. There was one afternoon I still remember with unusual clarity. I was 8, and I'd made a paper crane, hundreds of careful folds, following a library book on origami, sitting cross-legged on the living room floor for the better part of an hour until my fingers ached. I was proud of it in the specific, glowing way children are proud of things they've made with their own hands. Benjamin came through the room, tossing a tennis ball against the wall the way he always did when he was bored, and the ball bounced wrong, clipped the edge of the coffee table, and landed square on my crane, crushing it flat. He didn't even stop walking. "Oops," he said, and kept going, like the word itself absolved him of anything more. I picked up the flattened paper and tried to fold it back into shape, but paper remembers being crushed the way people do, it never quite goes back to its original lines. I kept that ruined crane in a drawer for years. I'm not sure why. Maybe because it was proof. Maybe because some small stubborn part of me needed evidence, in case anyone ever doubted that this had really been my childhood. By the time I was 14 and Benjamin was 16, we had become polite strangers who happened to share a bathroom. He got his license and started disappearing on weekends with a group of loud, restless boys who thought recklessness was the same thing as freedom. I buried myself in books, in debate club, in anything that gave me a reason to be anywhere else. We didn't fight anymore, not really. Fighting requires a kind of engagement neither of us wanted to spend on the other. I remember one dinner, Thanksgiving, maybe, or close to it, when our cousin Oliver asked, half joking, "You two ever talk anymore, or is this a silent movie?" Benjamin laughed it off. Charlotte and I communicate through eye rolls. It's very efficient. I forced a smile. Inside, something old and small still ached, the ballerina with the broken ankle, spinning nowhere. There was a night, a few months after that dinner, when I overheard my parents talking in the kitchen after they thought we were both asleep. My mother's voice, low and tired, I don't know what happened between them. They used to be close, when they were really little. Do you remember? Before he started, she didn't finish the sentence. My father just sighed, the particular sigh of a man who works too much to have the energy left over to solve a problem he can't clearly name. I lay awake a long time that night, turning that unfinished sentence over in my head. Before he started. Started what? Breaking things. Closing doors before they could be opened. I wanted to march downstairs and finish the sentence for her, but I didn't. 13-year-olds rarely do the brave thing when the moment actually arrives, whatever they imagine about themselves later. We went to different colleges. I studied psychology, half because I was genuinely curious about why people become who they become, and half, though I wouldn't have admitted this at the time, because I wanted to understand my own brother, wanted a language for the distance between us that wasn't just he broke my things and never said sorry. Benjamin studied business, dropped out twice, found his footing eventually in sales, where his easy charm and total imperviousness to guilt turned out to be surprisingly marketable skills. We saw each other at holidays. We texted on birthdays. We were family in the census sense of the word, not the way people mean when they say we're close. I remember visiting him once during my second year of college, a strange, stilted weekend where we tried to be normal siblings for 2 days and mostly succeeded at being polite roommates instead. We went to a diner. We watched a movie neither of us really followed. On the last night, sitting on the balcony of his shared apartment, he said, out of nowhere, "Do you ever think about how weird it is that we grew up in the same house and turned out like this?" Like what? I asked. Like people who have to schedule small talk, he said, and there was something almost wistful in it, though he covered it quickly with a laugh. Anyway. You want another beer? I said yes, and the moment passed, the way most moments between us passed in those years. A door cracked open for half a second, then quietly shut again before either of us had to walk through it. Then, when I was 26, Benjamin married Olivia. I liked Olivia instantly, which surprised me. She had a warmth that seemed to come from somewhere real, not performed, the kind of person who remembered your coffee order and actually meant it when she asked how you were doing. At the wedding, she pulled me aside near the dessert table and said, "I know you and Ben have history. He's told me a little. I just want you to know I see you as my sister too, not just an in-law." I hadn't expected to cry at someone else's wedding, but I did, a little, right there by the cake. For a few years, things seemed almost fine. Benjamin had a wife who softened his edges, or so it seemed from the outside. I told myself the old resentments were childish things, better left in a box somewhere, unopened, the way you leave a wasp nest alone once it's gone quiet. I didn't know then that quiet things can still be broken. I didn't know that Olivia would be the one to call me, for years into their marriage, and ask, voice shaking, if I could come over, because she didn't know who else to call, and because, in her words, you're the only person who might actually understand him. It was a Tuesday in March when Olivia called. I remember because I was elbow deep in a stack of client files at the counseling center where I worked, 3 years into my career as a family therapist, a job I'd chosen, I now understood with some discomfort, largely because I'd spent my whole childhood trying to be a peacekeeper in a house with only one active combatant. Charlotte. Olivia's voice was thin, stretched. Can you come by? I don't know what to do anymore. I left early. I told my supervisor it was a family emergency, which felt both true and understated. When I got to their house, Olivia answered the door with red-rimmed eyes and a forced, apologetic smile, the kind people wear when they're embarrassed to need help. Benjamin wasn't home. She made tea neither of us drank and sat across from me at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around the mug like it was the only warm thing left in the world. He shuts down, she said. Every time something's wrong, every time I need him to actually talk to me, he just goes flat. Says it's fine when it's clearly not fine. Won't apologize for anything, even small things, even when he knows he's hurt me. It's like apologizing is a foreign language to him. I sat very still, because something in my chest had gone cold and unrecognizable. He broke a promise to me last month, she continued. Said he'd be at my father's surgery. Didn't show. When I asked why, he said, I got caught up. That was it. Not sorry. Just an excuse, delivered like a weather report. And it's not the first time. There was our anniversary last year, he forgot, and instead of just saying he forgot, he tried to convince me we'd already celebrated it early. He'd rather rewrite the last 2 weeks than say 4 words, I forgot, I'm sorry. Charlotte, she said, wiping her eyes, I love him. I do. But I feel like I'm slowly drowning in a marriage where I'm the only one who ever admits fault. Every disagreement ends with me apologizing for reacting badly to something he did, because he's never once said he was wrong first. I let that sit in the room for a moment before I spoke. Olivia, I said carefully, I need to tell you something, and I need you to understand I'm not trying to make this about me. But I grew up watching exactly what you're describing. I know that pattern in a way that isn't just professional. She looked at me, waiting. Benjamin broke things when we were kids, I said. My things. On purpose sometimes, by carelessness other times. And he never once apologized like he meant it. Our mother would make him say sorry, and he'd say the word, but it never had any sorry inside it. I think he learned somewhere, very early, that owning a mistake was the same thing as being unlovable. So instead of ever admitting fault, he just flattens it. Erases it. Moves past it like it never happened. Olivia's eyes filled again. How do I live with that for the rest of my life? I didn't have an answer for her that night. But I made her a promise I wasn't sure I could keep. I would try to help. Not as a therapist, you can't ethically counsel your own brother's marriage, but as a sister who understood the shape of the wound better than almost anyone alive. Before I left that night, Olivia hugged me at the door, longer than I expected. Thank you for not telling me I'm overreacting, she said. Everyone else in his life makes excuses for him. His mother does it. His friends do it. I just needed one person to tell me I'm not imagining this. You're not imagining it, I said. I promise you that. I started, cautiously, spending more time with both of them. Not as an intervention, not at first, just dinners, weekend visits, the ordinary architecture of family life rebuilt on purpose. I wanted to observe before I acted. Old habits from my training, and older habits still from childhood, where watching carefully had always been safer than speaking. What I saw surprised me. Benjamin wasn't cruel. He wasn't cold in the way a cruel person is cold. He was afraid, in a way I hadn't had the vocabulary to name when we were children. Every time a conversation edged toward blame, I watched something close behind his eyes, like a shutter coming down. He'd crack a joke. He'd change the subject. He'd say, "Can we not do this right now?" with a note of genuine panic under the irritation. One evening, after Olivia had gone to bed early with a headache that I suspected was more heartache than headache, Benjamin and I sat on the back porch with 2 beers neither of us finished. "She thinks I don't care," he said, out of nowhere. "I care. I don't know how to do the thing she wants." The talking about feelings thing. "Has anyone ever taught you how?" I asked. He laughed, short and humorless. "Nobody in our family talked about feelings, Charlotte. Dad worked. Mum worked. We were fed and clothed and told to figure the rest out ourselves." "You used to break my things," I said. It came out before I decided to say it, quiet, without heat, just laid on the table between us like a card I'd been holding for 20 years. Benjamin went very still. "That was a long time ago." "I know. I'm not bringing it up to punish you. I'm bringing it up because I think it's connected to what's happening with Olivia. You never said sorry to me, not really, not once, and I don't think it's because you didn't care. I think it's because somewhere along the way, you decided that admitting you'd hurt someone meant you were a bad person, permanently, irreversibly. So you just didn't. You skipped the step. You went straight from doing the thing to acting like it didn't happen, because facing it felt like it would break you." He didn't answer for a long time. The porch light buzzed above us, moths knocking softly against the glass. "I don't know how to fix 20 years of that," he finally said. "You don't fix it all at once," I told him. "You start with one thing. One real sentence, to one person, about one specific hurt. That's it. That's the whole first step." He looked at me sideways, something unguarded flickering across his face, something almost like the boy who used to stand over broken things and not know what to do with his own hands. "Will you help me?" he asked. Not as my sister who's mad at me. As, I don't know. As someone who might know how. I thought about the ballerina with the broken ankle. I thought about the crushed paper crane, still folded wrong in a drawer somewhere in our parents' house. I thought about the years of silence. I thought about Olivia's face at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug of tea she never drank. "Yes," I said. "But you have to actually do the work, Ben. I can't do it for you." He nodded slowly, and for the first time in a long time, I saw something like relief cross his face, the relief of a man who has been carrying a door shut against a storm for years and has just been told, finally, that he's allowed to open it. What followed was not a movie montage. It was slow, and it was awkward, and it was frequently humiliating for Benjamin in a way I think he needed. I couldn't be his therapist, so I found him one, a good one, a man named Dr. Whitfield who specialized in emotional avoidance and family of origin patterns. I sat with Olivia sometimes, not as her counselor either, just as a sister-in-law who'd learned, professionally and personally, that healing rarely happens in isolation. I taught Benjamin, gently, and sometimes not so gently, the difference between an apology and an excuse. I remember one night at their kitchen table, months into this process, when he tried out a sentence on me first, like a man testing ice before he steps onto a frozen lake. "I was wrong to miss the surgery," he said, haltingly. I told myself I got caught up, but the truth is I was scared of being in a hospital again after Dad's heart thing, and instead of telling Olivia that, I just didn't show up. And I let her think I didn't care. That was wrong. "I'm sorry." I felt something crack open in my chest, something old and long frozen. "That," I said, "is an apology, Ben. Do you feel how different that was from sorry, it's fine now?" "It felt like standing outside with no coat on," he admitted. "That's what honesty feels like the first few times," I said. "It gets warmer." He practiced. He failed sometimes, reverted to old patterns, got defensive, stormed out of one particularly hard session with Dr. Whitfield and didn't speak to any of us for 4 days. I remember that week clearly, because Olivia called me twice, worried he'd retreated permanently, and I found myself in the strange position of reassuring her about my own brother's character while privately wondering if I was right to be so confident. He came back, though. That, more than anything, told me something had genuinely shifted. The old Benjamin would have simply let the silence become permanent, the way he'd let so many other silences become permanent. There was a session, Olivia told me about it later, since I wasn't there, where Dr. Whitfield asked Benjamin to describe the exact moment he'd learned that admitting fault was dangerous. Benjamin apparently sat in silence for almost 10 minutes before he spoke, and when he finally did, he talked about being 6 years old and breaking a lamp in the living room, and our father, exhausted from a double shift, snapping at him harder than the moment deserved. "You always ruin things." "Not the lamp. Not this one mistake. Always." A life sentence handed to a 6-year-old in 4 words. I hadn't known about that memory. When Olivia told me, something in me softened toward my brother in a way I hadn't expected. It didn't excuse what he'd done to me over the years. But it explained it, and explanation and excuse are not the same animal, however similar they can look from a distance. Olivia started to soften too, in her own way. She'd spent years building walls of her own, protective ones, and those don't come down just because the other person starts trying. Trust is not restored by a single good conversation, it's rebuilt the way you'd rebuild a bridge, one plank at a time, testing each one's weight before you put your full self on it. I watched my brother's marriage slowly stitch itself back together, thread by uneven thread, and I understood something about forgiveness I hadn't fully grasped in all my years of studying it professionally. Forgiveness isn't a single decision. It's a practice. You choose it again every time the old wound twinges, every time you're tempted to keep score. I was choosing it too, quietly, in the background of all this. Every time I helped Benjamin find the words Olivia needed, I was also, without ever saying it aloud, teaching myself to let go of a music box that stopped playing when I was 7 years old. I want to be honest about something. Helping fix my brother's marriage was, in some ways, easier than dealing with my own feelings about him. There were nights I drove home from their house furious, not at Benjamin exactly, but at the unfairness of it. I had spent 30 years absorbing the lesson that my hurt didn't matter enough to warrant a real apology, and now here I was, coaching my brother through learning to give real apologies to someone else. I hadn't asked for one myself in years. I'd stopped expecting it. I brought this up with my own therapist, a soft-spoken woman named Dr. Alvarez who had a gift for asking exactly the question I was avoiding. "Why haven't you asked Benjamin to apologize to you?" she said, one Thursday afternoon. "Because I don't think he can," I said. "I've watched him try with Olivia. It's taken him a year to learn how to say a real sentence. I don't think there's room for me in that yet. Or, Dr. Alvarez said gently, you've spent so long being the strong one, the fixer, the one who doesn't need anything, that asking for something for yourself feels like betraying the role. I didn't have a good answer for that. I sat with it for weeks, turning it over the way you turn over a stone in your pocket, feeling its shape without quite looking at it. There was a night, not long after, when Olivia called me, not in crisis this time, but in something like joy. He did it, she said. He apologized. Really apologized, unprompted, about something small, before I even had to ask. Charlotte, I think we're going to be okay. I was happy for her. I was. But I hung up the phone and sat alone in my apartment and cried in a way I hadn't in years, not sad tears exactly, something more complicated. Relief, tangled up with an old, stubborn grief for the version of myself who'd waited so long for the same thing and never gotten it. I remember sitting on my kitchen floor that night, the phone still warm in my hand, staring at the ceiling and thinking about all the birthday cards Benjamin had signed over the years with nothing but his name, no message, no acknowledgement of anything between us. I thought about every holiday dinner where we'd sat 2 seats apart and talked about the weather. I thought about how good I'd become at being fine, at needing nothing, at being the sister who didn't require maintenance. I realized, sitting there, that I had been so busy healing my brother's marriage that I had quietly, carefully, avoided healing the oldest wound in the room, the one between the two of us. The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. I spent the day walking around the city with no destination, past the old apartment building where Benjamin and I had grown up 2 blocks over, past the park where I used to read alone while he played basketball with friends who never seemed to invite me along. I let myself feel, fully, for the first time in a long while, how much it had cost me to be the family's quiet one. Before I could face Benjamin, I found myself, almost involuntarily, driving to our parents' house on a Sunday afternoon. My mother was in the garden, the way she always was on weekends now that she'd retired from the pharmacy, kneeling in the dirt with a trowel, humming something tuneless to herself. She looked up when she heard the gate. Charlotte. This is a nice surprise. I sat down on the low stone wall beside her flower beds, and for a while we didn't talk about anything important, the weather, her tomatoes, and neighbor's new dog. Then, without quite planning to, I asked her the question I'd been carrying since I was 13 years old, eavesdropping at the top of the stairs. Do you remember when Ben and I stopped being close? When we were kids? She set down her trowel slowly. I've wondered if you'd ever ask me that. I heard you and Dad talking once, I admitted. You said before he started, and then you stopped. I've always wondered what you meant. My mother was quiet for a long moment, brushing dirt from her hands. Your father and I worked so much, she finally said. I think Ben felt like nothing he did registered, not the good things, not the bad things. I remember one night, he broke a lamp, and your father, God rest how tired that man was in those years, said something he shouldn't have. You always ruin things. I heard it from the kitchen and I didn't say anything, and I've regretted that silence for 25 years. I felt something shift in my chest, some old certainty reorganizing itself. I didn't know that's where it started. It's not an excuse, my mother said quickly, reading my face. What he did to you, breaking your things, never apologizing, that wasn't your fault, and it wasn't something you should have had to just absorb. I should have protected you better. I should have made him say real apologies, not just the word. I was so tired all the time, Charlotte, and I told myself sorry was enough, because I didn't have the energy to make sure it actually meant something. That's on me too, not just him. I hadn't expected an apology from my mother that afternoon, and it caught me somewhere soft and unguarded. Thank you for saying that, I said. I'm proud of what you've done for him and Olivia, she added. But Charlotte, don't let helping him become another way of disappearing yourself. You deserve your own turn. I thought about that phrase the whole drive home. Your own turn. As if forgiveness and repair were a cue, and I'd spent my whole life letting other people go first. It took me another 2 months to work up to it. 2 months of small moments, a family dinner where Benjamin reached for the salt and I flinched, almost imperceptibly, remembering a hand reaching for a music box, a birthday call where he said, "Sorry, I'm running late," and I heard, underneath it, 20 years of sorry that never quite landed. I finally asked him to meet me alone, no Olivia, no parents, just the two of us, at the small diner near our childhood house where we used to get milkshakes as kids before everything got complicated. He looked nervous when he sat down across from me. "This feels like an ambush," he said, half joking. "It's not an ambush," I said. "It's a conversation. The one we've been avoiding since I was 7. His smile faded. "Okay." I took a breath. My hands were shaking slightly, which surprised me. I'd rehearsed this in my head 100 times, sitting with clients, coaching other people through exactly this kind of moment, and still, here I was, trembling like it was the first time. "Do you remember the music box Grandma gave me?" I asked. He nodded slowly. "The one with the ballerina. You broke it when I was 7. You said it was an accident." Maybe it was. I don't actually know anymore, and honestly, it doesn't matter that much whether it was on purpose. What matters is what happened after. Nothing happened after. You said it's just a box and walked away, and I picked up the pieces by myself, and I never got a real apology. Not for that. Not for the kite. Not for the bike. Not for the paper crane, if you even remember that one. Not for any of it. Not once, in almost 30 years, has anything you broke of mine ever come with a sorry that felt real. Benjamin's jaw tightened. For a second I thought he might do the old thing, the deflection, the joke, the sudden urgent need to check his phone. I saw him fight it, visibly, like a man holding a door shut against wind. "I don't remember most of it the way you do," he said slowly. "I remember being a kid who felt like nothing I did was ever going to be enough, so I stopped trying to be careful, because careful didn't seem to matter anyway. And then breaking things became, I don't know, easier than caring. If I never admitted it mattered, I never had to feel how much I'd messed up." "I talked to Mum," I said quietly. "About the lamp. About what Dad said to you." Something flickered across his face, surprise, then something raw underneath it. "She told you about that?" "She did. I think she's carried it a long time." He looked down at the table, at his own hands. I was 6. I remember thinking, if breaking something makes him say that to me, then I guess that's just who I am now. Somebody who ruins things. So why fight it? "That's the same thing you told Dr. Whitfield," I said. "About Olivia." "I know," he said. "I've been thinking about you a lot, actually. During all of this. Every time I practiced an apology for Olivia, I kept thinking, Charlotte has been waiting for one of these for 20 years, and I've never given her one." My throat tightened. "Why didn't you?" "Because I didn't think I deserved to be forgiven by you," he said, and his voice cracked on the last word, cracked in a way I had genuinely never heard from my brother, not once in 32 years of being related to him. "You became this person who helps everyone else heal. You helped save my marriage, Charlotte. You gave me the words I needed to fix things with Olivia, and I don't even think you realize what that cost you, watching me learn to do for her what I never did for you. I know what I owe you. I've known for years. I just didn't know how to start paying it, because I was scared that if I finally said it, and it wasn't enough, if you didn't forgive me, I'd have nothing left to hide behind. I was crying by then, quietly, not the wrecked sobbing of a 7-year-old over a broken music box, but something steadier, more grown, water finding the cracks in a dam that had held for decades. I don't need you to be perfect, I said. I never did. I just needed you to see me. To see that it mattered. Benjamin reached across the table and took my hand, something he hadn't done since we were small children, before all the silence set in. He looked me directly in the eye, the way Olivia had told me he'd finally started doing with her, the way that meant something now because I knew how hard one it was. I'm sorry, he said. For the music box. For the kite. For the bike. For the crane, if that's what you're talking about. I do remember it, actually, now that you say it. I remember exactly how it looked before I ruined it. For every single time I broke something of yours and made you feel like it didn't matter, like you didn't matter. I'm sorry it took me this long. I'm sorry you had to teach me how to fix my marriage before I found the courage to fix this. You didn't deserve to wait that long. I'm sorry, Charlotte. I mean it. All the way down. 2 words, and 100 sentences underneath them, and none of it undid the years. But it was real. I could feel that it was real, the way you can feel the difference between a photograph of a fire and actual warmth on your skin. Thank you, I whispered. That's all I ever wanted you to say. We sat there for a long time after that, not talking much, just letting the diner noise fill in around us, the clatter of plates, the hiss of the coffee machine, an old song playing low on the radio behind the counter. At one point Benjamin laughed, a wet, surprised sound. We used to get milkshakes here, he said. Every Sunday, before all of this. Do you remember? I remember, I said. You always stole the cherry off mine. I'll pay you back for that too, if you want. I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in that entire conversation. Just get me a new one, I said. And this time ask first. People imagine forgiveness as a single door swinging open, one moment after which everything is different. It isn't, not really. What changed, after that diner conversation, wasn't dramatic. Benjamin and I didn't become inseparable overnight. There was no movie-perfect embrace in that first week, no swelling music. What changed was smaller and, I think, more durable. He started calling just to talk, not because he needed something. The first few calls were painfully awkward, long pauses, both of us reaching for a kind of ease we'd never actually practiced. I remember one call where he asked, "So, what do you actually like to do?" For fun, I mean. I realize I don't know. It stung a little, that question, but I answered it honestly, and slowly, over months, we built something neither of us had had before, an actual friendship between adults, not just siblings sharing a family tree. He started noticing when I seemed tired and asking why, instead of assuming I'd manage on my own the way I always had. He showed up, unannounced but welcome, at my apartment one evening with takeout from the Thai place I liked, because Olivia had mentioned I'd had a hard week with a difficult client case. It was such a small thing. It undid me a little, in the good way. When I mentioned, in passing, that I still had a small wooden box on my dresser where I kept things that mattered to me, he didn't say anything at the time, but a few weeks later, a package arrived at my apartment. Inside was a music box. Not the same one, of course, that one was long gone, thrown out decades ago in a drawer somewhere in our parents' old house. This one was new, carefully chosen, wooden, with a small painted rose on the lid, close enough to the original that my hands shook when I opened it. When I lifted the lid, a tiny ballerina spun in slow circles to a tune I didn't recognize but that felt, somehow, like it belonged to me. There was a note tucked inside. "Charlotte, I can't give you back the years, and I can't unbreak what I broke. But I can make sure the next one doesn't end in silence. Play it whenever you need to remember that some things really can be fixed. Love, Ben." I sat on my kitchen floor and cried for a long time, the good kind of crying, the kind that empties something out to make room for something better. I called him that night, and instead of thanking him with something small and polite, I told him the whole truth, how much that music box had haunted me for 30 years, how many nights I'd thought about that ballerina spinning to a song that stopped too soon, how much it had meant to hear him finally say sorry in the diner. "I want to keep doing this," he said. "The being honest thing. Even when it's uncomfortable. Especially then, probably." "Good," I said. "Because I'm not letting you go quiet on me again." A few months into this new, hard-won closeness, Olivia asked to meet me for coffee alone, something we'd never really done, just the two of us, without Benjamin as the bridge between us. She looked lighter than she had in over a year. "I wanted to say thank you properly," she said. "Not just for helping Ben. For everything you gave up to do it. I know it wasn't free for you. It wasn't entirely selfless," I admitted. "I think some part of me needed to see whether he could actually change, before I let myself hope he'd ever change for me too." Olivia reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "For what it's worth, I don't think you should have had to wait that long. I used to lie awake some nights early on, feeling guilty that you were spending all this energy repairing my marriage when I knew, because he told me, eventually, that he owed you the exact same repair and hadn't given it." "You knew?" I asked. "He told me, about 6 months in. Said he felt like a fraud, learning to apologize to me while still owing you the biggest one of his life. I told him he needed to fix that, and honestly, Charlotte, I think some of what pushed him toward that diner conversation with you was guilt over how unfair it felt to keep growing with me while leaving you exactly where you'd always been. I hadn't known that. It changed something in how I understood those months, not just Benjamin learning slowly on his own timeline, but Olivia, too, quietly pushing him toward the door he needed to walk through with me. Thank you, I told her. For pushing him. Thank you for teaching him how to be pushed towards something good instead of running from it, she said. That's rarer than people think. We sat together a long while after that, two women who'd both loved the same difficult, changing man in different ways, and found, somewhere in the process, an honest friendship of our own. That autumn, our parents decided to sell the house we'd grown up in, the one with the room Benjamin and I had shared, the one with the driveway where the kite met its end, the one with the back porch where the paper crane had once sat drying by a window before it was flattened under a stray tennis ball. Benjamin and I spent a Saturday there together, sorting through decades of accumulated life, deciding what to keep and what to let go. In a box in the closet of our old shared room, under old yearbooks and a broken alarm clock, I found it, the paper crane, still crushed at one wing, folded wrong forever, exactly where I'd left it years ago. I held it out to him without a word. Benjamin took it carefully, turning it over in his hands, and I watched something move across his face, recognition, and then something heavier. I remember this one, he said quietly. The tennis ball. I didn't even stop walking. You said oops, I told him. I kept it in a drawer for years. I think some part of me needed proof that it had really happened, that I wasn't imagining how much it hurt. He was quiet for a long moment, turning the crumpled paper over and over. Then he did something I hadn't expected. He asked if I still remembered how to fold one. I think so, I said. Why? Because I want to watch you make a new one, he said. Right now. And this time, I want to actually pay attention while you do it, instead of walking through the room like it doesn't matter. We found paper in an old desk drawer, and I sat cross-legged on the same living room floor where I'd sat as an 8-year-old, and folded a new crane while my brother watched, really watched, asking questions about each fold, marveling at the parts that turned out crisp and even. It took 20 minutes. When I finished, I set it in his open palm. There, I said. Unbroken. He looked at it for a long time. I don't think I ever understood, until right now, watching you do this, how much care went into the things I destroyed without thinking. It wasn't just paper. It was an hour of your attention, your patience, your pride in something you'd made. I took that from you 100 times and never once understood what I was actually taking. You understand now, I said. That's what matters. He kept that crane, the new one, on his desk at work for years afterward, a strange little totem that no one else understood the meaning of, except the two of us. A year after that diner conversation, we were all together again, Benjamin, Olivia, our parents, and me, at a family dinner that felt, for the first time in my adult life, entirely unforced. Olivia was glowing in a way I hadn't seen since her wedding day, and it wasn't hard to guess why. She confirmed it over dessert, laughing, hand resting lightly on her stomach, that they were expecting their first child. Benjamin raised his glass that night, and instead of a joke, he gave a toast that silenced the whole table. I spent most of my life breaking things and pretending it didn't matter, he said, looking first at Olivia, then at me. I broke promises. I broke trust. I broke a music box that meant more than I understood at the time, and a paper crane, and probably a dozen other small things I don't even remember anymore, though my sister remembers every single one. For years, I thought the way to survive my own guilt was to just never look at it. My sister taught me that's not survival, that's just delay. She taught my wife and me how to actually talk to each other, and God knows what would have happened to this family if she hadn't. But more than that, she taught me that the people who matter most are usually the ones we take most for granted, the ones we assume will wait forever for an apology we never quite get around to giving. He looked at me, and his eyes were wet, and for once, he didn't look away. Charlotte, I'm sorry doesn't erase 20 years. But it's the truest thing I've ever said to you, and I intend to keep saying true things to you for the rest of my life. Thank you for teaching me how, even when I didn't deserve the lesson. I love you. I stood up, walked around the table, and hugged my brother the way I hadn't been able to since we were small enough to still believe the world was simple. I love you too, I said. And for what it's worth, the new music box plays every night. It's the best thing anyone's ever given me. Better than an unbroken one would have been, honestly. Because this one, I got to watch you choose. Our mother was crying quietly into her napkin. Our father reached over and took her hand, and I saw something pass between them too, some old guilt of their own, easing, just slightly, at the sight of their children finally whole with each other. Later, walking to my car under a sky full of quiet stars, I thought about the 7-year-old girl who'd knelt over broken porcelain pieces and believed, in the particular absolute way children believe things, that some hurts simply never get repaired. I thought about all the years I'd spent helping strangers in my office learn to say the words my own family had never taught me, and how strange and fitting it was that healing my brother's marriage had, in the end, been the very thing that finally healed us. I thought about the paper crane on his office desk, wings a little uneven, folded with real attention this time. I thought about the ballerina in my new music box, spinning to a tune neither of us recognized but that had become, somehow, entirely our own. Some things, once broken, really do stay broken. But some things, if you're patient, if you're honest, if you're brave enough to finally say the sentence you've been avoiding for 20 years, can be made new. Not the same as before. Something different. Something earned, plank by plank, across years neither of us could get back but both of us finally understood. 7 months later, Olivia gave birth to a baby girl. They named her Grace. After the idea, Benjamin told me, holding his daughter for the first time, exhausted and radiant. After the thing you gave me before I even knew how to ask for it. I held my niece in my arms that night, feeling the impossible, total weight of a new life, and thought about music boxes and paper cranes and 20 years of silence finally broken open into something like light. "Welcome, Grace," I whispered to her. "You have no idea how hard your father worked to be able to say those words to you clearly, one day, without ever having to learn the hard way like I did." The ballerina in my music box still spins, a little wobbly, to a song I've long since learned the words to, humming it under my breath some mornings without even meaning to. I don't mind that it's not the same tune as the one I lost. Some songs are supposed to change. That's how you know they're still alive. Sometimes the words we wait our whole lives to hear don't erase the past, but they can change the future. If this story touched your heart, let us know in the comments. If you enjoy emotional family stories like this one, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.